For more than a decade, The Voice China sold itself as the country's most trusted talent show. A polished billion-view spectacle worth more than $250 million. But on a summer night in 2023, everything cracked. A short backstage recording leaked online, capturing the final moments of Coco Lee's struggle with the production team. Her voice shaking, her frustration visible, and her insistence that the show had deliberately sabotaged her contestant. Within hours, outrage swept across China. Viewers who once treated the show like a national ritual suddenly began to question everything they thought they knew about it. Why did Coco Lee sound like she was fighting alone? Why did her microphone cut out? Why were her performances edited into fragmented seconds instead of full songs? And more importantly, who inside the production had the power to decide whose voice was amplified and whose was erased? The answers pulled the public straight into a maze of hidden rules, backstage manipulation, and a hierarchy controlled by a small circle of producers, including the influential figure at the center of this crisis, Cecilia Han. As accusations piled up from former contestants, industry insiders, and even veteran celebrities, the image of a fair competition collapsed. It wasn't a singing show anymore. It was a system built on selective editing, pre-drafted winners, and backstage intimidation. Tonight, we uncover how a show valued at $250 million didn't fall because of one scandal. It fell because every decision behind the scenes was designed to protect power, not talent. When The Voice China debuted, it immediately rewrote the rules of televised music competitions in the country. It wasn't just a show, it was engineered as a national event, backed by licensing power from the global franchise and aggressive investment from Chinese entertainment conglomerates, who saw a golden opportunity. At a time when variety shows were cheap, chaotic, and easily replaceable, The Voice stood out with its cinematic stage, million-dollar set designs, and a polished format that instantly eclipsed its competitors. Brands lined up for sponsorships, paying premium prices to reach a weekly audience that surpassed the viewership of some state broadcasts. By its third season, insiders estimated its total ecosystem, including advertising, music sales, touring contracts, and streaming rights, to be worth more than $250 million, turning it into one of the most lucrative entertainment machines in Asia. But behind the glamour, a quiet hierarchy was already taking shape. The production team, especially its senior editors and executive producers, held absolute control over which contestants were featured, which stories were highlighted, and which performances would be chopped into seconds. That circle grew tighter as the show became more profitable, and one of the strongest figures within that structure was Cecilia Han. Known publicly as a producer with sharp instincts and a reputation for discipline, she became the gatekeeper of screen time, narrative arcs, and the subtle choreography of emotional beats that determined how viewers would perceive each contestant. With every season, the system hardened. Contracts became more restrictive, clauses became more favorable to the production company, and contestants realized they weren't just performing. They were entering a controlled environment where every decision was predetermined before they stepped onto the stage. Yet the public had no reason to question anything. Because ratings climbed to historic levels, advertisers poured in money, and celebrities competed to appear as coaches. The machine worked perfectly as long as no one looked too closely. And that was the secret to the empire's stability. The illusion that success was earned, not assigned. For executives, the show wasn't about discovering talent. It was about maintaining a brand so profitable that any threat to its image had to be neutralized immediately. Sponsorships worth tens of millions depended on polished narratives, not real competition. That mindset shaped everything: camera angles, judging comments, even the emotional arcs built into each episode. By the time the franchise entered its 11th year, the production team had refined its power to an art form. They could elevate a contestant to stardom with a single edit, or bury them with a 3-second montage. They could turn a coach into a national icon, or reduce their influence by quietly trimming their screen time. Every frame was a calculation tied to contracts, partnerships, and financial incentives. And because this empire generated so much revenue, few insiders dared challenge its authority. The audience didn't know it yet, but the show's enormous financial success was precisely what made its downfall inevitable. When profit depends on control, and control depends on silence, everything collapses the moment someone refuses to play along. That moment was coming, and it would begin with a series of accusations that exposed just how far the production was willing to go to maintain its dominance. As the show grew into a financial titan, the gap between what the audience saw and what actually happened inside the production widened into a full-blown divide. The Voice China operated with an internal rule book that contestants never saw, a system calibrated to shape results long before a single note was sung. Former participants later described an environment where competition existed only as a performance tool, not a real process. Contestants were sorted into tiers from the moment they arrived. Some were promised screen time, others were marked as filler talent, and a select group was quietly groomed to move deep into the season. These decisions weren't based on vocal ability. They were driven by commercial potential, sponsor preferences, pre-negotiated agreements, and the production team's strategy to keep certain narratives alive. Editing played an enormous role. Hours of strong performances could be sliced into seconds, eliminating emotional buildup and making a talented singer look forgettable. While weaker contestants with the right backing were elevated through carefully constructed story arcs. Insiders spoke about spotlight packages, curated sequences that were assigned only to contestants the producers favored. These packages included emotional backstories, slow-motion cuts, amplified crowd reactions, and dramatic transitions, tools that shaped how audiences perceived talent long before coaches turned their chairs. And overseeing much of that editorial architecture was Cecilia Hahn, whose authority stretched from the control room to the final cut delivered to the network. Her influence meant that even judges, global stars with decades of experience, often found themselves reacting to a version of the show that differed from what the public believed. Many coaches noticed that their critiques were trimmed, rearranged, or even softened in post-production. A harsh comment could be turned into a gentle suggestion. An enthusiastic response could vanish entirely. What the public heard wasn't spontaneous. It was sculpted to reinforce predetermined outcomes. But the manipulation extended far beyond editing. Contestants were pressured to accept songs they didn't want, coached to express emotions that aligned with scripted narratives, and discouraged, sometimes outright forbidden, from discussing any behind-the-scenes issues with fans or the media. Some recalled being given suggested dialogue moments before stepping on stage, lines crafted to create drama or push a storyline that would boost ratings. Others described more coercive practices, being told their progression depended on their willingness to cooperate with production demands, or being warned privately that refusing a narrative direction would result in reduced screen time. The contracts made everything worse. Buried within them were clauses that forced contestants to sign over significant portions of future revenue in exchange for participation. Fees for management, endorsement deals, and even performance income could be deducted without transparency, leaving artists feeling exploited long after the season ended. Several contestants later claimed they earned almost nothing from performances that generated millions for the show. Even judges were not immune to manipulation. Some discovered that their mentoring sessions were selectively filmed or edited to create artificial favoritism, leading to conflicts among fans and tarnishing their reputations for decisions they never actually made. The production team justified these tactics as standard practice, necessary to maintain narrative flow and keep ratings high. But as the system hardened, it created a culture where winning depended less on talent and more on how tightly contestants, and even coaches, followed the production's choreography. Hidden within all this was an even more troubling element: the financial incentives tied to favoritism. Certain contestants were connected to agencies with advertising partnerships. Others were pushed because they aligned with brand deals, and some benefited simply because their storyline could be mined for emotional impact. The deeper the show moved into its multi-million-dollar ecosystem, the more aggressively these incentives shaped every decision on and off camera. All the while, the public remained unaware. Viewers believed they were witnessing fair competition, guided by authentic emotion, unaware that nearly every moment had been engineered to maximize profit. And because these systems had operated flawlessly for years without anyone challenging them, the production believed it was untouchable. That confidence would prove fatal. The machine had grown so accustomed to manipulating outcomes that it failed to recognize the one thing it couldn't edit, soften, or suppress: a world-famous artist who refused to play along. The breaking point was coming, and the first crack would appear on a night the producers assumed they had under control, right up until Coco Lee walked into the room. By the time Coco Lee joined The Voice China in 2023, the production team believed they had perfected a system so airtight that no coach, no contestant, and no outsider could disrupt it. What they didn't anticipate was that Coco, a global icon with decades of international experience, would refuse to accept the quiet injustices that everyone else had learned to endure. She entered the show expecting to mentor talent, not to witness what she would later describe as the deeply unfair treatment of certain contestants who had been marked from day one as expendable. One particular incident became the spark. During a key recording session, Coco noticed that one of her contestants had been assigned a last-minute rule change that guaranteed failure, an abrupt shift in song arrangement, unexplained technical issues with in-ear monitors, and a performance order that pushed them into an impossible position. When she confronted the production team, she was met not with explanations, but with hostility, indifference, and a quiet warning that she was overstepping boundaries. What happened next would shatter the show's carefully curated illusion. A backstage video, never meant to be seen by the public, captured Coco arguing with the staff, her voice strained, her frustration overflowing, her insistence anchored not in ego, but in her desire to protect a contestant who had been systematically set up to lose. Her words cut through the noise. The accusations of manipulation, the demands for fairness, and the pointed question of why rules kept changing only for certain singers. The production staff's evasive responses, rising tensions, and refusal to correct the situation painted a picture far more damning than anything a public statement could deny. And then, during the taping itself, the sabotage became undeniable. Coco's microphone levels fluctuated inexplicably. Her contestant's performance was clipped in post-production. Key moments of her coaching were either muted, cut, or rearranged. When the episode aired, viewers sensed something was wrong. Online communities began dissecting the footage, noting abrupt cuts, unnatural transitions, and mismatched audio. Rumors swirled, but it wasn't until the leaked backstage audio surfaced that the country erupted. In the recording, Coco's voice trembled between anger and heartbreak as she confronted the producers about the contestants' treatment. She detailed how the rules had been altered, how edits were distorting the truth, how the contestant had been pushed into a predetermined loss. Her emotional intensity, far from being theatrical, exposed the humanity behind her frustration and the cold machinery she was fighting against. Within hours, millions of fans demanded an explanation. Hashtags calling for justice trended across every major platform, and celebrities who had once worked on the show began liking, sharing, or subtly endorsing posts that criticized the production's tactics. For the first time, the empire cracked. The production team responded with rehearsed statements claiming misunderstandings, but their tone only deepened public suspicion. And then came the darkest turn, news of Coco Lee's passing. Although the circumstances were not directly tied to the show, the timing collided with a wave of public outrage, turning it into a national reckoning. Fans revisited every backstage moment, every leaked clip, every fragment of her final weeks, viewing them through the lens of mistreatment and emotional strain. Vigils appeared across Chinese social media, filled with questions about why she had been forced to confront that environment alone. As the outrage intensified, eyes turned toward Cecilia Han and the core production staff. Their silence, once a shield, became a symbol of guilt. Former contestants resurfaced with stories of similar experiences. Moments when their microphones mysteriously failed, when judges' comments were rearranged, when painted narratives overshadowed their performances. Each voice added pressure, building a collective accusation that could no longer be dismissed as rumor. The producers underestimated Coco because they assumed every celebrity would protect their image before challenging the system. But Coco Lee was not like the others. She fought openly, emotionally, and fearlessly, in a place where most people stayed silent. And in doing so, she became the catalyst that exposed everything The Voice China had spent 11 years hiding. The moment her backstage audio reached the public, the show's fate was no longer in the hands of its producers. It was in the hands of an outraged nation that had finally seen behind the curtain. When the scandal erupted, the production team behind The Voice China reacted not with transparency or accountability, but with the one instinct that had defined their operation for more than a decade: control. Except this time, control was slipping. Their first move was to minimize the situation, releasing a carefully worded statement insisting that the leaked audio of Coco Lee had been taken out of context and that the show had followed all standard procedures. But in a landscape where millions had already heard her trembling voice and seen the disjointed broadcast edit for themselves, the message felt hollow, almost insulting. Rather than calming the public, it intensified suspicion. Fans began comparing multiple episodes, dissecting audio levels, replaying abrupt cuts, and compiling evidence of manipulated performances across several seasons. The production's strategy to smother the narrative through silence, censorship, and vague explanations was instantly recognized as an attempt to bury the truth. When they moved to disable comment sections, restrict hashtags, and block related searches on major platforms, it only fueled the perception that the show had something far darker to hide. Inside the crisis room, panic spread. Sponsors began calling, not to defend the show, but to ask whether their brand names were now associated with a potential national disgrace. Some paused ongoing campaigns. Others requested contractual reviews. Whispered reports suggested that millions in ad revenue were suddenly in jeopardy, and the show that once thrived on its reputation for prestige now looked like a financial liability. With corporate partners getting cold feet, the production turned to its second strategy: targeted messaging through state-aligned media outlets. Articles appeared attempting to reframe the scandal as a misunderstanding, positioning Coco Lee's frustration as emotional intensity common in the entertainment industry. But the public, already angered by the show's earlier denials, rejected the narrative instantly. Comment sections overflowed with rebuttals, screenshots, and breakdowns of inconsistencies. Even official-sounding statements could not withstand the force of public examination in a digital environment where viewers had become amateur investigators. Meanwhile, Cecilia Han and the inner circle of producers went completely silent. No interviews, no clarifications, no direct response. Their absence, instead of creating mystery, became the clearest admission that the team had no defense strong enough to withstand scrutiny. As pressure built, entertainment reporters in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore began publishing detailed investigations into the show's financial ecosystem. Articles examined the billion-yuan sponsorship deals, the alleged preferential treatment tied to agency partnerships, and the opaque structures that controlled contestant contracts. What had started as a controversy over a single recording spiraled into a forensic dissection of an entire industry model. The scandal grew further when former contestants, who had been silent for years out of fear or contractual restrictions, finally began speaking indirectly through social media likes, cryptic comments, or subtle confirmations to fans. Even these small gestures carried enormous weight, each one suggesting that Coco Lee's claims were not isolated, but emblematic of a systemic practice. The public anger hardened into something deeper, a demand for accountability. Calls to audit the show's finances circulated widely. Discussions erupted on whether the franchise should be suspended, restructured, or permanently removed from the airwaves. And then came the breaking point. Several major brands officially withdrew their sponsorship. Overnight, millions evaporated. Broadcast partners reportedly pushed for emergency meetings. Production deadlines stalled. What had been a smooth-running, highly profitable machine now looked fractured and unsalvageable. Internally, blame ricocheted between departments. Editors accused executives, executives accused producers. Producers claimed the controversy was being exaggerated by external forces. But none of it changed the reality that the crisis had already grown larger than the show. When The Voice China finally announced it would be temporarily paused, no one believed the pause was temporary. The damage was too severe, the backlash too widespread, and the financial losses too overwhelming. A $250 million empire that once dominated prime time had collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. And at the center of the destruction was a truth the production never expected to confront. For years, they believed they could engineer outcomes, edit narratives, and manipulate perception without consequence. But the one thing they couldn't predict was that a single unfiltered moment, Coco Lee's unedited voice, would be powerful enough to unravel everything they had built. The empire was broken, and the public was no longer willing to look away. In the end, The Voice China didn't collapse because of a single scandal, a single video, or even a single artist's confrontation. It collapsed because the truth finally became louder than the show itself. For years, the production team relied on silence as their strongest weapon. They trusted that contestants would stay quiet, that judges would play along, and that the audience would never see beyond the polished stage. But the moment Coco Lee's unfiltered pain reached the public, that silence shattered. No amount of editing could erase the raw honesty in her voice, and no crisis statement could rebuild the trust that evaporated overnight. Viewers began questioning not just the show, but the entire entertainment system that allowed manipulation to flourish behind closed doors. Sponsors withdrew, networks distanced themselves, and insiders who once viewed the show as untouchable now treated it as a cautionary tale. The empire that prided itself on shaping narratives discovered it could not control the one narrative that mattered most: its own downfall. What remains today is not simply the memory of a popular show, but a reminder of how quickly power collapses when built on hidden rules and unchallenged authority. Coco Lee's final stand exposed a reality the producers never wanted revealed. That talent was never the priority. Fairness was never guaranteed, and the price of silence was far higher than anyone imagined. As the industry continues to adjust in the aftermath, one question lingers: will China's future talent shows dare to operate under the same systems, or has this scandal finally forced a reckoning? The answer will shape the future of entertainment, but the legacy of what happened here will not disappear.